Alright, this is John Black, Super Chemist, or Part D. Let's recap what we've already gone over, okay? And then we'll get into numbers. And then we'll go all the way up to Kings. Yeah, there's actually a book in the Bible named Kings. So the Bible, you know, it starts out with humans, Adam and Eve, right? And they are blessed. They get God's blessing. They are blessed. And they're given the Garden of Eden, the tree of knowledge, but they decided to eat from the tree of knowledge, and God doesn't want you to eat from that. He doesn't want you to have any knowledge. That's evil. Okay, so that makes sense. And so He kicked them out as a punishment for eating the knowledge. He doesn't want you to have any knowledge. So they lost their blessing, right? They lost their blessing. They are not blessed anymore. They got to work and blah blah blah, and you know they have babies and they have pain. And what happens now? There's no bloodline, and God's basically saying, well, that's why things are going downhill here in the Garden of Eden. Why you screwed up and you don't have a bloodline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a bloodline. That this woman, this seed, this woman's going to have a seed, and her seed or descendants, you know, is going to take out the Satan, the snake who tricked Adam and Eve into eating the tree of knowledge. You know, for tricking them to eating knowledge, because that's eating knowledge is evil. Remember, that's what the Bible wasn't written by King. This isn't a message from kings. No. This is a message from God that knowledge is evil. Because that makes sense. So anyway, so he's saying right there, hey, you lost my blessing, okay? And then what happens then? You got Cain and Abel. You know, the brother kills the other brother, and then it just goes downhill from there after they leave the Garden of Eden, all the way up until Noah. And what does God say? Right? He says everyone is crap that doesn't have this royal blood of Noah. Right? He says you're all horrible. Noah's the only one that, you know, he's got this royal bloodline, and then he kills everybody with the flood. Right? Because they didn't have a monarchy. See, they didn't have a bloodline like Noah. Noah has a bloodline, so he gets to survive. Okay? Anyone without the bloodline gets killed. Okay? Then Noah goes on, and he has kids and blah, blah, blah. And God says, right? God says to Noah, hey, your bloodline is royal, but only one of the bloodlines is royal. The one that leads to Abraham. All the other bloodlines lead to pieces of crap. Okay? That aren't royal. All right? And that's what the world is infested by, right? Is Noah's descendants are plentiful, you know what I mean? If he has 10 kids or 5 kids or how many he had, I don't know how many he had, you know, each one of them have 5 or 10 kids and so on and so forth. So you can see his genealogy branches out, there's going to be millions of people, or, you know, hundreds of thousands at first, or thousands at first. But only one of them is royal, okay? Only one is the monarchy, okay? And that's monarchy blood, that royal blood is the only way that humanity can get back that blessing that they lost. See, Adam and Eve had no king or bloodline. They obviously screwed it up. So God says, I'll give you a bloodline later on. Noah's the bloodline, but only one of them. Only one of the bloodlines to go to Abraham, right? God's saying the rest of you are garbage. And you can only get this blessing back, okay, if you go into this covenant, this promise that God makes. That if you follow the bloodline, okay, that you will be blessed. You will get your blessing back. And the only way you can get just like Jesus, you can't get into heaven unless you worship Jesus. You can't, just like this, before Jesus, when it was just Judaism, right? You cannot get God's blessing back that He gave you. You know, He gave Adam and Eve, and they screwed it up, right? You can never get that back. You can never have His blessing. You can never be blessed unless you go into this covenant saying that this bloodline from Noah to Abraham, a direct bloodline, that only that one bloodline is royal. And if you don't follow that bloodline, and then it goes on, and it shows, because then Abraham has the bloodline. That's the next part of Genesis, right? And it shows that Abraham will screw up, his sons will screw up, his grandchildren will screw up, but you have to obey, you have to keep the bloodline of Abraham, because without it, you cannot be blessed, right? See? And every time Abraham destroys everything, every time his son destroys everything, and every time his grandson destroys everything, it's okay. Don't worry about it. That doesn't matter. What matters is, because you only had one other choice, right? Was to not follow Abraham and his son and his grandchildren and blah blah blah, right? And that will take. You can't be blessed. You can only get God's blessing is if you're following this bloodline. And the bloodline, it doesn't matter how horrible the bloodline is. It doesn't matter. Because that's the only way you can get your blessing back from the tree of knowledge thing that Adam and Eve did. They screwed it up. They were blessed. Yeah. And then God took back his blessing. You can never get that blessing back unless you follow the bloodline. You go into this covenant. That's the whole premise, okay? And the whole thing is that every time, because then they have Babylon, right? They go away from the bloodline, and what happens to Babylon? God destroys it all because they weren't following the bloodline. That's what happens when you don't follow the bloodline. You get kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and you lose your blessing. If you don't follow the bloodline, you get flooded in a flood, and everyone dies except for Noah's bloodline. And then what? If you don't follow the bloodline, you start creating Babylon and making these big cities, then you get destroyed by God. But then the story changes over to Abraham comes along. Oh yeah, he does all the same stuff. His kids do all the same stuff. They're all horrible, just like these humans over here were horrible. Adam and Eve, and Cain and Abel, and all the way down to Noah. Everyone was horrible or whatever, right? That was not forgivable because there was no bloodline until Noah. That's why Noah got to be saved, because that's what happens when the bloodline is blessed. The bloodline is blessed. It can't be taken away. That's what God's promise is. That's what the covenant is. That the covenant is that the bloodline will always survive. And then what happens? Every time, like when Abraham screws up, God reminds him of this covenant that he is going to be, his bloodline is going to. That's what happens when the bloodline messes up. This is what happens. We know what happened when there was no bloodline. What happens? They get flooded. They get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. All this kind of stuff. But what happens when you embrace the monarchy? You embrace the bloodline. When the bloodline screws up, like Abraham, God says, "Don't worry. I have a covenant with you. I have a promise with you. Your bloodline is going to be good, man. Don't worry about it. All you have to do is follow the bloodline, and you'll be blessed." You know what I mean? If you don't follow the bloodline, you won't be blessed. No. And then what? Jacob takes over, the son. He screws everything up, but at the end, what happens? Jacob actually wrestles God and tells him, hey, puts him in a headlock, gives him some noogies, says, "You better bless me, God." And this story is written by God. It sounds like it's written by a king. Yeah. Keep in mind, Moses has this bloodline. He wrote these books. He wrote the first five books. That's why we're going to go over them. He wrote them. He has the bloodline. That makes him a king by definition, because he's a leader. Because people say that Moses was put in a basket and put down the river, and he was just a little orphan boy. He was just a nobody. Oh yeah, he's just a nobody. Yeah, it says right in the Bible, the reason why God picked Moses is because he had the bloodline. It was all because of this covenant that he made with Abraham. That's why he was sent down the river to be saved and become whatever, be the leader. It says it right there. We just saw it. We just seen it. We know. I just showed it in the video. That's why he was chosen, because of his bloodline. Okay? Keep in mind, Moses wrote these books telling you that his bloodline is blessed. And if you don't follow his bloodline, then you won't be blessed, right? And so you go to Exodus, and all you have is story after story, right? About how the people turn their back. I'm hungry and I need water, and I'm going to worship this statue, and they all keep turning their back on Moses, right? And what happens? They all get punished. And their only redemption, right? Like when the snakes are coming and biting them and killing them all, right? When Moses came down from the mountain, right? And they're worshiping the golden calf. God sends all these snakes, right? And then what does God do? Supposedly God, gives Moses a scepter. And how can they say they're being bitten by snakes? And the Bible wants you to know that the only way that you can stop them snakes from biting you is by Moses' blood. You can go over to Moses, and he has a scepter, and you can look at Moses, look at him in his eye, and look at that scepter he has, and realize, follow him, bow to his bloodline, and then you will not be in pain anymore, and you'll be cured, and you'll be okay then. Every time that the people turn their back on Moses, they get punished. Right? Like they ain't allowed to. Next time the people say, "Oh, I don't want to." We've been going in this desert a long time. I want to just go back to Egypt. So God punishes them by saying, "You can't go into the promised land. Only the next generation would be able to go into there. Until then, they would have to wander around the desert." That's your punishment. But because you turned your back on the bloodline, right? But your descendants, they're going to embrace the monarchy. They're not going to say, "Oh, I want to go back to Egypt." They're going to say, "I embrace the monarchy. I embrace the king. King Moses, King Moses. Thank you, King Moses. Your bloodline is a blessing. The only way I have access to God is through the king. So I thank you, King Moses. Thank you, King, because your bloodline is the only access I have to get that blessing that Adam and Eve lost for me and humanity." And I know this. I know it's for fact because it's in the Bible. Yeah, King Moses wrote that Bible, so this all makes sense. It's not circular reasoning in any way, shape, or form. No. But the whole story up till now is basically if you don't have a monarchy, you're lost because you're evil. Okay, humans are evil and they'll screw it up. And then it's like, well, here's this bloodline. If you follow the bloodline, yeah, they're going to screw up too, just like the non-monarchy people. But their blood is blessed. And if you follow them, you'll be blessed too. Don't worry about fixing society. Don't worry how the kings are going to destroy everything. Every time a new king comes along, they're going to destroy everything. Don't worry about us. This isn't a king talking. Yeah, don't worry about us destroying. Don't worry about all the kings. King after king after king after king being evil and destroying everything in your society. Don't worry about that because this royal blood is blessed, so it's okay. Don't worry about that. You're gonna be good when you go to heaven. Don't worry. Don't try to change anything. You just have faith. Okay, have faith in the monarchy, even though we can plainly see the monarchy sucks. The kings are horrible. They're horrible, horrible people. Okay? But somehow, God, you're blessed by following these horrible, horrible people. You can't get access to God. You can't get access to His blessing that He gave Adam and Eve and took back. You can't have that if you do not follow the bloodline. Okay. And Moses has that bloodline, and he's the one who wrote the 5 first books, and he wrote Job, the book of Job. Okay, so all I'm saying is, it sounds like a king telling you to follow this bloodline of horrible, horrible, horrible people and it doesn't matter because their bloodline is blessed.